Are you struggling with roadblocks as a woman in the challenging and constantly changing world of corporate America? If you feel stuck in your career, you may be holding yourself back and may not even realize it. Prepare to be enlightened by the meaningful discussions here at the No Woman Left Behind podcast. Each week, gather the insight you need to break down those walls of limiting beliefs. Unleash your full potential and unlock the leader within. Listen to raw conversations with corporate women as they share inspiring stories with the purpose of obtaining their dream career and living a truly fulfilling life. Here's your host, Rosie Zilinskas.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the No Woman Left Behind podcast show. I'm Rosie Zilinskas, your podcast host. Today we're talking to Ulrike Seminati. She is in Switzerland, and I will be having a conversation with her specifically around her experience as a former C-suite executive. I think it's really important for us, obviously, to talk about women moving up the corporate ladder, but it's just as important for us to highlight the challenges that women in the C-suite or executive level have today. So let me tell you a little bit about Ulrike. Ulrike Seminati is a longstanding senior executive, coach, and author. With over 20 years of being a successful leader in corporate organizations, Ulrike believes that female leadership is one of the biggest untapped potentials in the world. Ulrike is known for combining all her experience and years of excelling in the corporate world with powerful self-development techniques that she gives to hard workers like you, allowing you to flourish, realize the root causes of your struggle, and finally land that leadership spot you're after. So stay tuned for my conversation with Ulrike. Welcome to the No Woman Left Behind podcast, Ulrike. Thank you so much for being here today. And for those listening, I am recording this on a Saturday morning where it's 5 p.m. in Switzerland, where Ulrike is located. So I know that you are very well versed in the executive realm, in C-suite realm. And what I would like to know is you and I spoke before, and you had mentioned that one of the mistakes that women do when they get to that executive level, that C-suite level, they lose their femininity or they hide their femininity. So I want to know, why do women do that, and why is that a mistake?
So I think, well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to be with you. Let's come back to the question. I think we all do that automatically because human beings try to fit in. We are wired in our brains like that we think we need to fit in. And this is something that is not appropriate anymore in today's life. But like 10, 20 or 50,000 years ago, if you did not fit into your tribe, you were excluded. And that was death penalty by the past. And this is why our brain is so much wired into, okay, there's a group of people. And if it's a C-suite, then it's a C-suite group of people. And I have to fit in. And what we see in the corporate world is that we have specific behavioral codes. They can vary from one company to another, obviously, with the company culture. But overall, these codes have been shaped over decades by men. So they fit a certain, and not only by all men, by a certain type of men. Yeah. So they fit to a certain type of men. And as women, very rarely, we naturally fit into this kind of behavioral pattern that is out there. So naturally, we think we have to adapt to the behavior. We have to show up in a different way, speak differently, stand differently, dress differently, and whatever it takes to fit in. And some women do that consciously or are aware when they're doing it because they really feel it goes against what they really are, and that can be painful. And many others just do it unconsciously. When they climb up the career ladder, they become more and more male in a certain way, in their way of speaking, in their way of dressing up. You rarely see a C-level woman dressed in pink. Yep. They also go more for dark blue and gray and all of that. And that has even reasons in our brain. It's not just the society or culture. It's really ingrained in our brain in a certain way. And this is why that happens. And I think this is where we lose our diversity, basically. Because when we speak about women in C-suites or women in leadership positions, no matter how high up in the hierarchy level, it's all about having this feminine perspective, whatever that means. Yeah? It can be very different as well from one woman to another. But we lose that diversity as soon as women are not themselves anymore, whatever kind of woman they are. If they are the more emotional type or they're more tough type, doesn't matter. But as soon as they adapt to a certain way of being, well, we don't have that diversity. And then I don't see, where's the reason for having women in a C-suit if they're not women anymore?
That's very ironic, right? Because we are trying to empower women to move up the corporate ladder. And again, today we're talking more about executive and C-suite level women. And it's ironic that they lose that femininity as they climb the ranks. And that's what the mistake is, because you lose your diversity as a woman and you're trying to think more like the men. And we really want to bring that female perspective because, as Ulrike said, we want to have that diversity. And when there's more diverse people, everybody knows that it benefits the company because the company sees everything from different perspectives. So I think that's a great thing to point out. Okay, so what can women do to be listened at that high level? Because as we both know, it's very difficult for men, especially when it's a room full of men and there's one woman, for her to be heard. How does that work?
I think it depends very much on what the woman thinks about herself. First of all, you certainly have seen women in C-suits or in positions where you were very surprised, like, wow, she's really self-assertive. That doesn't mean that she's like a man. She's just assertive, sure about herself. You might have seen women also dressing like a woman, very feminine, and really living this femininity and still being, wow, a real authority in her area, and people listen to her. And I think this has nothing to do with how much women adapt to the group or to the behavioral code. They can be very controversial and creating some surprises as well with their way of being, as long as they are solid and grounded in who they are. Because when you are that, nobody can resist you, because you will convey this message of, hey, I love myself. I'm fine like I am. Take it or leave it. And I'm an expert in my field at the same time. And that is why I'm here. And I'm here with my full self and not just with this small professional part that I was used to maybe be able to share or dare to share before, because that is the mistake, that you only share this, what you think is the tolerated professional part instead of the whole package. Exactly. And that is the difference. Yeah.
So what has your experience been? Like, tell me of a situation maybe where you've been in that kind of position and you were able to bring your whole self, and how did the men in the room react?
Well, I did that, and then I retracted from it. And that was the big mistake that I made. And this is also why I'm doing what I'm doing today, because I think this should never, ever happen again. Well, it happens all the time with different people around the planet. But so what actually happens is I was brought into the C-suite as the youngest person at the same time. So there was this double weight. On the one hand, I was in my early 40s. So, wow, she's really young and she's a she.
Yes. Oh.
And I was always a very feminine woman, and I always liked my femininity. I really liked that. I love to wear skirts and dresses and all of that, and not just the formal ones all the time. And so I tried to maintain actually this way of being to a certain extent, and it worked okay-ish. I was always torn apart between this feeling, I have to be differently probably to be accepted. But it's kind of making compromises with myself all the time. Big mistake, by the way, big mistake. I wouldn't do that anymore at all if I had the same situation again. Because what it led to ultimately is that there was once a very difficult decision that we had to make. We had to relocate people to other countries. And that is a big cut, obviously, in the organization, and it will create a lot of uncertainty. So it's one of these critical situations that you have to handle as a C-suite executive together with the CEO. And I knew that it's not all about the discussion as such or the decision as such. That is a painful one and we cannot avoid it. It's about how you execute things. And I think this is where the female perspective is so important and makes such a difference, how we execute things. Because what I realized then is that the men in the group were just not sensitive at all to the potential pitfalls that come with a more human and empathetic approach to this whole thing. So what for me was totally normal, like thinking about the people who stay, who will be have a lot of fear that they will be the next ones, about the people who will have to leave, who lose their jobs, obviously. But even those who stay, they didn't even think about these guys. And for me, it was like, how can you not even have that as an idea in mind? It's not, I mean, it's just incredible. They were nice guys, they were not, it was not a bunch of these tough people where you say they have no heart. They were really, really nice people and nonetheless didn't have that on the radar at all. And I started to really fight for my position in the how we execute these things, that we should do in a certain way so that it's less painful and that it's very respectful towards people, both those who have to leave and those who have to stay. And there are ways of doing this, like preparing the leadership below us, that they can prepare mentally and not just send it out like a bomb. Mm-hmm. And at some point, I realized that I created a lot of irritation in this executive committee about myself, because I realized that for them it was just too complicated. They thought, no, we push it through and people will forget that in 3 months they're over it and we can just go on with business as usual. And I knew, no, people don't forgive that. If they stay in the company, they remember that in 3 years, in 5 years. It's like a trauma that you create in an organization. And at some point I gave up my opinion. I gave up my position because I had the feeling, okay, if I insist, we will maybe do the right thing, maybe not, because I will never push it through. But I will feel excluded of the group. And all these self-doubts that I had before, like, oh, I'm the youngest one, there are others who had more experience than I did, and so on, came into play and made me retract my position. And that led to the fact that we went into the wall straight into, we were sending out this bomb and it was a disaster. And I knew it. And afterwards I thought, how stupid is that? And this made me really think, something like that should not happen ever anymore, because it is this position that a woman can take. Men can also take that position, but I made that experience that naturally they don't come up with these kind of perspectives on certain situations, not that naturally. And when we do not push through this position and these red lights, the red flags, that like, this is going wrong, guys, then we hurt a lot of people. I mean, this was harming many, many lives, the motivation of many in the company and so on. I can't even count how much harm it did at the end and how much harm we could have avoided. And so this is why I think it's so important to really be very clear on how far can I defend my position, and if I can't, what can I do to bring my full self into the picture and to be assertive and courageous enough to do so? And that is the real difficulty for many women when they climb up the ladder.
Absolutely. And it was a fantastic lesson for you, because what I find so interesting about men is that they can compartmentalize. They can come to work and it's almost like they leave all their feelings aside. Whereas we women, we don't leave our feelings, at the entrance of work. You bring your feelings because, especially someone that has led before, which both you and I have led before, you have to think of the person. You have to think about how the company's decisions impact the human being, not just the employee. And I think that's one thing that just now companies, especially with the pandemic, companies are starting to try to do, to bring attention to how do we treat the whole self and not just the employee part. But it's so, I feel for you, being in that situation, how difficult it must have been, you being the only woman, and then all the men going, oh, don't worry about it, they'll get over it. And that's just terrible. So I'm glad that was a good lesson for you, and then a good lesson for all of our listeners to not give up your position when you truly believe that it's the right thing to do. So that's great. So along with those lines, then, you say that it's crucial to trade perfectionism for authenticity. So I think it's a little bit along this. So tell me a little bit about that.
So women tend to be perfect. They want to be perfect. I don't know the percentage or if there's any science about that, how many women are perfectionists or near to being one at least, but it's very high. What we can say is that women have a high level of self-criticism, and perfectionists have an extremely high level of self-criticism because they are never satisfied. I am a perfectionist, and if there's 1% that is not good enough, I used to blame myself for these 1%, and I was never able to celebrate the 99, which is crazy. And rationally, I understood this, but I still wasn't able to not blame myself for these 1%. And that is a huge mistake when it comes to self-confidence. I mean, perfectionism is, I think, the biggest enemy of self-confidence. How can you be self-confident if you never celebrate yourself full-heartedly for an achievement? Because there's always something that's not perfect, at least in the eye of a perfectionist. Always.
Yes.
And that is a big enemy. And why is perfectionism a problem when you want to raise your profile, when you want to step into the big roles, and when you still want to feel good about yourself? Because obviously the bar is higher. You need to reach more things. You need to deliver more things. You have the feeling that you have to be more inspiring, also rally more people around you. And there's another level of communication that is asked from you as well. And if you are a perfectionist, you will always be very inward looking, because you always think about, how do I come across? What will I say next? Have I said that in the right way? Oh, is my dress looking fine? Oh, I'm not sure. Maybe I should rearrange my hair. These thoughts are permanently bombarding your brain while you're presenting or speaking to someone. And when you're doing this, you look inside of yourself, and that means you are not able anymore to look into the audience, to look into the eyes of people, to send truly a message out, because you're speaking. But the vibes are not going out anymore because the vibes go into yourself. And people feel that. People feel that there is no presence, the famous executive presence. There is no presence that is coming over because the person is so much focusing on herself because she wants to be perfect. And that's why I say it's much better to make a few mistakes, to stumble over your words here and there, to not look perfect, to not be fully adapted to whatever group where you're in, but to stay yourself and just have that energy to send out energy, joy, optimism, inspiration, whatever you want to send out, and to really focus on this exchange instead of focusing on being perfect and delivering the perfect message. And that makes a big difference. That's what I'm teaching a lot when it comes to communication for leaders. I think it's absolutely essential. And most people are so bad presenters because they focus so much on delivering the perfect presentation. Yeah. Instead of just focusing on the audience and letting it go, letting it flow a little bit.
Yeah. And you've seen a million movies where someone's going to do a speech and they have all their little cards, and then they're like, oh, forget the cards. And then they just speak from the heart. And that's when their speech makes a difference. So, and I think that actually happens in real life, because if you're so worried about how you're going to say things or how you're going to sound, instead of the impact that you're trying to do to your audience, to your team, to your staff, whomever. So I think that is great advice, because sometimes you're just so stuck in your head that you're not able to serve your community. So I think that's great. Now, you also say that we need to use our story into our superpower. So what does that look like? I'm really interested to hear this one, because obviously we all have a story. So how do we turn that story into our superpower?
I think it's about the learnings that you have in your life. Definitely. Because we all have a story about what we have learned, what we have done, the mistakes we have made, and all of that. And I have made many, many, many mistakes. And today my mistakes shape my superpower, basically. The story which I just told you before, where I was not doing or not sticking to my opinion, that is definitely such a huge learning for me that I turned it today into this superpower of detecting these kind of behaviors also in other people, and helping them to detect it themselves, to realize that, and to step into another dimension. And I think we have to go back to our learnings, and they were always coming from mistakes. In my opinion, there's no real learning, deep learning, without a mistake, because it hurts and then you remember and then you grow. And if you look at it like this, then you grow. So you can grow into having really a package of superpowers, if you look at your mistakes and at your future mistakes as well as opportunities to get your super tools into your superpower box in a certain way, and to combine these things and to really think about, okay, what have I lived in my life actually? What were the situations that were more difficult for me? For people who lived through real hardship, I see that very often, that they turn this quite easily into superpowers. They had a very hard time in their lives, and that shook them up so much that they couldn't ignore it. And in the best case, they just get out of it, 10 times, 100 times stronger than they have been before. For people like me, I didn't have that kind of hardship and really, really, really hard situations in my life. So it's much more difficult to detect these things, because you have to look into the little stuff, basically. Some experiences like the one I shared is a bit bigger, a bit more obvious, but there are many other situations which people too easily wipe away because it was a mistake, and I think, I don't think about it anymore. And then they do the mistake again 3 years later because, yes, they have kind of forgotten it. Wow. Whereas they could have turned it into, what's the learning? It's maybe a small learning, but small things add up. And this is how you can grow a very competent profile and turn it into strengths and create, and that's very important, an awareness of it. Because we have loads of strengths, but are we aware of it? Most of us are not, especially the perfectionists, because they're so self-critical. Closing the loop. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's incredible, because I think that's a little bit of what you and I are trying to do today, right? So when I was going through I went through a time where I went through a really bad divorce, and it was one of those things that I had to fight for my kids. And then from there, I had these 2 little kids to take care of. And I knew that I had to advance in my career so that I could take care of these 2 little kids. So that was like one learning that I had for me, like, I need to hustle. I need to move up that corporate ladder. But I was working really hard and thinking to myself, any day now, someone's going to come and say, hey, Rosie, you want to become a manager? But nobody ever came. And then when I finally said something, that's when things started happening for me, and I became a manager. But that was part of my story, where it taught me to learn to use my voice so that I could advocate for myself. And now I'm in turn paying it forward and trying to advocate for other women, as you are doing as well. So I love the fact that you use that phrase, turn your story into a superpower, because you can do amazing things when you triumph from some kind of hardship. So that's fantastic. Now, I'm curious about the next thing that I'm going to ask you. So how can women break through that inner glass ceiling, but that keeps them small?
First of all, you need to see where it is. You can literally imagine, a glass ceiling is a nice metaphor for that. So you can imagine inside of yourself, somewhere at a certain level, is a glass ceiling. And if you don't know where it is, then you cannot do anything about it. So I think the first thing is really to understand, where is my glass ceiling? You can do some mental exercises for that. If it's related to career, then it's also related to money. So there are 2 ways of doing that. Best is to doing both ways. You can imagine, and that's a little bit more conceptual, actually. You can imagine a position, a really high position where you want to get to, maybe not in the next week, but maybe in 5 years. Something that is truly inspirational for you and seems quite out of reach. And while you imagine yourself and visualize yourself in that situation, you then listen to yourself, because obviously at the one hand, you're like, wow, this is great. Oh, if I could be there. But very, very surely at some point you will get thoughts like, but you have not the competencies to get there. You will never get there. You're not good enough for that. And now others can do that, but not you, or you're too old. I mean, thousands of thoughts. You will be bombarded by your negative beliefs in this situation. And what people often do is then they push them away and kind of forget them again. What you can do to create more awareness is, after that exercise, write them down. Whatever you heard, what have you heard? What were these thoughts? And then look into your normal life. What are you doing every day? How are you reacting in situations? And where do these thoughts come into play? If you have the classic one, like the I'm not good enough thought, Where does it come into play? How often have you thought it yesterday? How often have you thought it in the last meeting? How often have you thought it and you did not open your mouth to ask a question even if you needed an answer? Or how often did you not comment on something because you thought, I'm not good enough? The comment is meant not professional enough or whatever. And I think it's very important to understand that you have these beliefs. And another one, and I do that very often because it's more tangible, because it's about numbers. Think about your salary. You can do the same thing. Think about your salary and really listen to yourself how you feel about the salary. Is the slightest feeling of guilt or shame or doubt appearing? And if so, then in your mind, turn the salary down. If it's 100,000, go to 90,000, listen to yourself again. Do I feel any guilt? Do I deserve 90,000? Oh, still not. Oh my God. Go to 80,000. What I see is that nearly everyone, and this is really frightening basically, nearly everyone is comfortable with a salary that is lower than the one that they actually have, which means that they are already operating above their glass ceiling in a certain way. And this is why they hesitate so much to ask for a salary increase, because subconsciously they already believe they do not even deserve the salary that they have today. And salary increase means stepping up in the hierarchy as well, or vice versa. So when you apply for a new role and you're not aware that you subconsciously do not feel like deserving the salary that comes with it, you will self-sabotage the ways how you apply. You might not even apply at all. And if you do it with the doubt, no, I will not get that role anyway. And what you think of yourself, others tend to think of you as well. So if you convey this message subconsciously and with your body language and nonverbal cues that you do not deserve this role, you won't get it. And that will reconfirm the pattern that you're not good enough. And this is how you stay under your glass ceiling, basically.
Yeah. So you said a lot there that it's just like blows my mind. So obviously these are patterns, right? Because things that you think and that you keep recurring thinking. A simple example is I have to lose the last 10 pounds. It's like you wake up, you think it every single day. But when you are following a good diet or eating healthy and exercising and you start seeing the scale move down, that thought leaves your mind. So you have a headspace to think of something else. But if you're constantly sabotaging yourself, and I can't barely believe that you said that some people are thinking that they feel guilty earning a certain amount of money. And then, if they keep going down, like that's incredible to me. And that to me it's kind of sad, right? Because if you're already getting paid, whatever, say $100,000, you should feel that you deserve that money. And like you said, that's how we women sabotage ourselves when we think that we're not good enough. And, applying for jobs, as I've said this a trillion, times, that women don't apply for jobs. So I totally agree with you that we need to reframe how we think of our glass ceiling and continue to try to achieve something. And if your limiting self-beliefs start popping in, you need to squash those beliefs and reframe them so that you think, I deserve to be here. I deserve to be here, and I deserve the next position. So I think that's all really good information to talk about, because even executives and C-suite executives, they're going to be thinking this, especially because they might be the only woman in the room, as you will know. Okay, so communicating, I had just said a minute ago that one of my mistakes was that I didn't say anything. So that was one of my lessons. So what are the three common myths about communicating with impact?
I think the first common myth is about communicating is about sending a strong message out. And it's also about that. But I think overall communicating is about, first of all, listening and thinking about what the other person needs to hear or needs at all. And then you can communicate with impact. Whereas we usually do the opposite thing. We send something out where we think this is a strong message, and then it should land logically because we think that. And it doesn't. And it is because we never listen to the other person and never really took this empathetic look on the situation, so we can really tailor-make a message towards another person. So I think that is a very, very important thing. The other myth about communication is that only extroverts are good communicators because they make the show. Yeah, I don't believe so. I know that out there in the world, and especially in the corporate world, we have that image that certain personality types seem to be more successful or more adapted to be a good leader. And these are still also the stereotypes that we have in our mind, these behavioral codes that we are used to. And I think it is not like that. And so the myth about communication that you need to be very outgoing, very outspoken, very energetic, and only then really you're a good communicator is, I think, not true. Because what this leads to is that those who are more introvert, who are calmer people, who have another way of communicating, will have to be inauthentic. And authenticity is absolutely key in communication. It's not about being the big rah-rah person. It's about being authentic and truly staying yourself when you are communicating to the outside world. So this is, I think, something that is very important. And then what is about communication as well as the intent that you put into it. Because oftentimes we start so many ways of communicating. It's a dialogue, it's an email, it's a presentation. It's always a little bit different, obviously. Mm-hmm. But are we clear about the intent, the real intent? Often we send out an email and just stuff in there somehow, but the other person doesn't even know, what should I do with that? It's just for information? Do I have to do something? What exactly? By when? And it's very unclear quite often because we don't even ask ourselves, what is the intent? And a good intent is one where it's not about the win that you create for yourself because you need this information or you want someone to do something for you at work or something like that, but that you create and shape an intent, and that sounds like something well known, but people don't do it, shape a win-win. Think win-win, very simply. Your intent, you want something great. What is the win for the other person? Why should they do that? Why should they do that immediately? Step into their shoes, change the perspective. It's about the audience, not about you. It's about the audience, and shape their win before you just come to what you actually need from them. And then you will get much better results because logically people will see at first also their win because you said it at first, you wrote it in your first sentence and not in the last or nowhere. And then you get really something back much easier. You'll see it's much smoother to make your team do what you want them to do, to convince a peer person who had not the same opinion as you to at least go into a dialogue. It makes things much smoother.
Okay. All right. So what I got out of that was the very first thing is to listen. The second thing is to be authentic. And then the third thing is to have intent, communicate the intention. So I think those are fantastic because sometimes if you don't do one of those three things, it's going to fail because it doesn't have those three components. So I love that. Okay. So you and I both know that women don't negotiate as often as males. And as a matter of fact, I read a statistic that women can make up to $2 million less than a male over an entire career simply by not negotiating. So what are some things that you recommend for leaders to do when it comes to the next salary negotiation?
First of all, check your money mindset. Seriously, check your money mindset. It's all in there. I'm persuaded it's really all in there. You can learn the best negotiation techniques or whatever. You can read books about that, how you bring up the topic, all of that. If inside of you do not believe you deserve the amount you're negotiating, then you will send out all the nonverbal cues that are not congruent with what you're saying, and your arguments can be as rock solid as you want. You will sabotage them because your tone of voice is not congruent with the message, or your body language, or your eye contact, the micro mimics in your face. You cannot train that. So you really need to feel it. You really, this is the best, because then it will come all naturally. Because you will go in with such a conviction that you deserve that amount. So it's about your money mindset as such, also about your achievements. I know that many women are very self-critical about what they have achieved because they think it was good but not good enough and so on. Go back to your achievement and look at them from a different perspective. So for me, there are really two main things which you can do if you want to go much stronger in a negotiation, or even doing the first step of asking for a negotiation. That's the first thing to do. And one is what I said earlier on, is this money mindset piece, that you elevate your level. And you can do that by mentally blowing up your money belief, or your belief about your salary. Blow it up, not the belief, but the salary as such. Can visualize that, maybe like a thermostat or a thermometer or something like that, where you blow it up to 10 times the amount or 20 times, something completely unrealistic. And then you tune it down again until you feel no guilt anymore, until you feel, I deserve that amount. You will see. You can do that every day. You can do that 10 days before your negotiation every day, and you will feel where you're at. And if you want to negotiate 130,000 instead of 100,000, for example, or whatever it is, then go until you feel really good about your 130, better even about 200,000.
Yeah.
You have a bit of, because the situation as such can push you back into old behavioral patterns or thought patterns. That's one thing. And the other thing is being aware of your achievements, seriously. And what I often say to women who are so critical about what they do at work, they know that they're competent, but they don't feel it. And you need to feel that. And just track down your successes. Maybe start a success journal, like a gratitude journal, but a success journal. And write down all the little successes. And write them down, and that is the trick in here. You write them as if you were your best colleague or your best friend who appreciates your work. You write it from that perspective, not from yours. From yours, you will diminish them. From the other perspective, you write it as another person, you write it, and the first time you do that, you will already see, wow, what a gap. Because I would never phrase it like that. But you know that how other people will phrase it differently, and that changes the perspective. And then read it through again and realize, my God, if I see it from another perspective, there is another reality. It's not only what I think is right, is the reality. This other perspective is as real as yours, even if it is far more positive. But this kind of thing changes your reality at the end, because your thoughts create your reality, and that is important to understand.
Oh gosh, yeah. I think the money mindset is so critical. And we actually we've talked about mindset before on the podcast show here, but we haven't specifically spoken about money mindset. And to your point, if you don't feel it, if you don't believe it, and you go into the negotiation and you do all these what did you call them, like microfacials, or, all your body language. And if you kind of cower, and this kind of is a little bit of a tangent, but you mentioned this a little bit earlier, the executive presence. You have to, executive presence is basically what you say, how you say it, and how you look when you're saying it. So if you don't bring a solid executive presence to that negotiation conversation, I think that's when it all goes south. So, Amy Cuddy she has that famous TED talk where she does the power poses, and, she stands like Superwoman or whatever. So you really do have to, even before you start thinking about the negotiation techniques and what you're actually going to say, I think you bring a great position where you have to feel it. You have to, within your body, you have to feel it. You have to believe it. You have to bring that confidence. And then you can start talking about all of your achievements and stuff like that. And it's interesting that you use the word conviction, because I have been telling people that, well, previously I was saying you have to be able to articulate your worth with massive confidence and conviction. And I spoke to somebody that does a lot of language, and they said, no, you don't have to, you get to. It's a privilege. You get to be able to articulate your worth with massive confidence and conviction. And I think both of those, the executive presence, the conviction, the money mindset, that's all part of it. And it's hard to get there, but people can do it by doing some of the exercises that you said. I think that's fantastic. So have you, as a C-suite executive, have you done coaching for women when it comes to money mindset?
Not when I was a C-suite executive, but now.
Okay.
Now quite a lot. And this is why I say it's so crazy that nearly all of them are are actually comfortable with an amount, with a salary that is lower than their actual salary. This alone is a really good insight, because that explains a lot of things: why they are underpaid potentially, why they did not get that new position last year, why they never self-promote, why they never ask for negotiation either, and so on and so forth. And it's amazing, and it happens to all of us. So to me as well, I also check that for myself, and I'm doing it nearly every morning now for my business, to really check what do I accept? What do I accept as a business amount, as a revenue right now? And when I see it lowers again, well, I do the exercise and push it up again so that it stays on a really high level. And I saw things changing, and things change like that. What you create in your mind really changes what you create in the outside world. And it sounds so easy, but it's not, because we have so many subconscious sabotaging thoughts going on that it's really hard to clean up that mindset overall, not only for money, but for our success, for our position in the company, for private life, whatever you want to achieve.
Right. Gosh, that's just it. Obviously we're having this conversation for a reason, because we want women to know all these things about themselves. But at the same time, it's a little bit deflating that we women we're so hard on ourselves. And, the fact that you might think that you don't deserve the money that you're earning today, it's just, oh man, that just rattles my cage. Okay, well, Ulrike, we're coming down to the end here, but I know you have a gift which is a top 10 achievers lessons. And I'm going to put a link in the show notes so that anybody who wants that gift. So thank you very much for that gift. But do you want to tell me a little bit about your gift?
Yeah, so as it's called Top 10 List. It's a list of proven strategies that I've worked out based on my own experience of climbing up the whole career ladder, and about what I've seen with my clients, what I've seen when I was a C-level executive. So it's a good mix of things, from starting from your goals, but also then walking through your beliefs and creating that confidence and prioritizing differently, looking at other people that are more successful than you differently, and many other things. So 10 proven strategies, basically, how you can then shape a different leadership personality that is based on your true self.
That's fantastic. And you know what? I did want to go back to the fact that you said to journal your successes, but do it from a different perspective. I think that's fantastic, because as we all know, we are our biggest cheerleaders for our friends, our family, our loved ones, but not for ourselves. So when you're trying to really think about your mindset, when you do it from someone else's perspective, because you know that your best friend is not going to be as critical about you as you are about yourself. So doing that from a different perspective, I think that's gold right there. Okay, so one of the last things that I do is, could you provide us, and of course, you've given us a ton of really good information already, but could you provide us with 2 actionable tips that an executive or a C-suite executive could do to continue to maybe not necessarily advance, because a lot of women may not, either want to advance or get to that presidential position anytime soon, but how do they keep to the level of their peers and continue to be an effective leader?
So I think it comes back to 2 things that I said before as well. And these are for me really the top 2 things that you need in life and also in your career. And the first one is really this perfectionism versus authenticity piece. Be authentic, be yourself, and do not try to be perfect. Give your best, sure, absolutely. Give your best, but your best is then enough. If your best is, in your eyes, only 90% of what's required, then 90% is good because you gave your best. Trade that in. Trade perfectionism in for authenticity. Definitely, you will come over with much more energy. You will convey this, this radiating from the inside is not happening when you're holding yourself back because you try to be perfect. So that's definitely something. The famous aura around you, the charisma that comes out of that can never, ever come through if you stay in your perfectionism bubble. So you need to, go out of that. I think that's super, super important. And then logically, the decisions which you will make, the bold positions which you can take will come with that. So that is very, very important consequence of this kind of way of being. And another thing And that's very important in all levels. Your thoughts shape your reality. That is it. Not be aware. Create awareness, maintain awareness. Every day you can ask yourself in different situations, just, hold on. What have I thought about myself in the last 2 seconds? Oh my God, I had again this thought. Right. It pops in here. This is why I'm acting like that. This is why I'm feeling small right now. It will help you to grow because you can then really see yourself in a much more friendly light, actually, because you realize how harsh you are all the time with yourself. Mm-hmm. And you can grow your confidence. And that's what you need, definitely, if you want to step up and feel good in that position, because you have low confidence and still reach the high level. It's pretty painful. It's a very stressful exercise to stay in that.
All right. So what I heard you say was trade that perfectionism for authenticity. And then the second thing is thoughts create your reality. So those are so powerful. And I think those are really good because thoughts do create your reality. And, you kind of see that in people's lives when someone is like really negative all the time and they're just constantly like, life shits on them all day long, but someone that's really positive, life gives them positivity, just good experiences in life. And again, thoughts create your reality. It's not that hard, right? Okay. Okay. So Ulrike, this has been a great conversation. Any final thoughts before I let you go?
Well, I hope that the audience takes advantage of whatever I've said and tries to apply that in their daily life. It's not difficult, but it takes discipline because it takes time and it's a continuous evolution. So it's not done overnight. It's not done with a crash course for 1 week. It's a lifestyle and you can change this way of being. And the only person who can decide is you. So you don't need anyone else to do it.
I absolutely love that. I love the fact that you're saying the way you think is a lifestyle change, just kind of like your diet, losing weight. It's a lifestyle change. Same thing with your mindset. You just can't see your mindset the way you can see the weight on your body. So I think that's great. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you. This was fantastic. And how is it in Switzerland right now? Is it hot, cold?
It's pretty fresh now, so you need to get out your long sleeves again and little jackets, which is really unusual. A week ago, it was so hot.
Got it. Well, I'm right outside of Chicago, and it's nice here, good weather. So we'll have another, hopefully a couple more weeks, and then we transition into our winter. So, all right, Ulrike. Well, again, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you for having me.
I'm pretty sure you can understand why I invited Ulrike onto the podcast show. And by the way, she had to educate me on how to actually pronounce her first name. Close, but apparently I'm not exact. But Ulrike did a great job at providing us some really good information as a C-suite and executive level woman in corporate. One of the things that really struck me is that as a woman, you can't lose that femininity because it brings diversity into the conversation when you're in the corporate world. So I think that's one of the biggest things for me as a takeaway. And then the second thing for me is turn your story into a superpower. So use whatever grievances life has thrown at you and turn them into something positive, whatever the situation is. So again, great, powerful conversation with Ulrike. The last couple things that I will do is just recap her 2 tips. So tip number 1, she says, trade perfectionism for authenticity. So let's not try to be perfect. Let's try to be authentic. Tip number 2 is thoughts create your reality. So if you're a negative Nelly, life is going to throw negative things at you. But if you foster that positivity, life will show you positive things. So I am a true believer of that. Again, great conversation with Ulrike Seminati. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us. If you have any topics that you would want me to cover or that you're interested in hearing more about, please send me an email. I am on LinkedIn. You can contact me through my website, nowomanleftbehind.com. All of Ulrike's contact information will be on the podcast blog post, so you can get her information there. Also, she did provide us with a free gift, which is the top 10 Achievers lessons. And the link for that is going to be in the podcast or in the podcast blog notes as well. Okay, so with that, last thing is remember to be brave, be bold, and take action.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Let these stories of self-encouragement and professional development serve as a guide in navigating through corporate America in the most practical and fulfilling way possible. Do not forget to subscribe to the show at nowomanleftbehind.com for more content like this. Leave a rating and share it with your friends because we want to make sure that no woman is left behind. Until I see you next time, remember to be brave, be bold, and take action.